Hello, everybody. This is Jim Skelly, and this is the Global Conversation. It's the ninth mini lecture in the fall of 2010, the current semester, and the theme that we're looking at, most of us are looking at this week, is food, a topic that many of us love to think about regardless. Before we get into some discussion about food, and I want to give you a couple of resources, additional resources to what we have listed on the website, I want to talk about something else that's occurring, and that is the political changes in the United States that affect the kinds of things that we're looking at in the course. One of the more worrying ones, and let's be clear, I see a great deal of ignorance coming forward around several environmental issues, not least of which is climate change. If you thought it was bad before, it could get a lot worse. One of the things that has come out this week is that the United States Congressman John Shimkus, who is a possible future chairman of the congressional committee that deals with energy and the various environmental concerns tied to energy, believes that climate change should not concern us, apparently, since God has already promised not to destroy the earth. Shimkus is an evangelical Christian and a Republican member of the House from the state of Illinois, and he has signaled his desire to become chair of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, which is among the most powerful in the United States Congress. It touches on energy policy, environmental initiatives, and public health. During a 2009 hearing, he dismissed the dangers of climate change and the warnings of the scientific community by quoting the Bible. He noted first God's post-flood, remember the flood in the Bible, promised to Noah in Genesis. He quoted the following: "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though all inclinations of his heart are evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." Shimkus said, "I believe that's the infallible word of God, and that's the way it's going to be for his creation." Now, Shimkus hasn't realized that God, of course, probably didn't speak in English, but nonetheless, it also seems to counter a fair bit of relevant scientific advice today. Shimkus went on to quote from Matthew, and he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds from one end of the heavens to the other. And then he goes on, Shimkus himself goes on to say, the earth will end only when God declares its time to be over. Man will not destroy this earth. This earth will not be destroyed by a flood. I do believe that God's word is infallible, unchanging, and perfect. Well, let's hope that Mr. Shimkus is not the chair of that committee. I mean, well, this is really, we really need the best scientific thought available these days, and when you confuse religious sentiments with scientific analysis, you are making a very big mistake indeed. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at food this week. There's a number of very important videos on the website under theme number 11. Two of them deal with the United Kingdom's top scientific advisor, who's discussing the problem of food security. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. There's also a very good panel discussion with Vandana Shiva and others on the global food chain, as well as a lecture by Paul Roberts called Thinking Globally About Food. Now, in addition, we also have a video on skipping waste. These are people who actually live out of the waste thrown away by supermarkets and others. And I think it's worth taking a look at the extent of the waste. As many of you know, or I have said before, we throw away enough food in the United Kingdom and the United States combined to feed 1.5 billion people every day. 1 billion people in the world don't get enough food, and yet we're throwing it away. So enough food to feed nearly a quarter of the world's population is thrown away. Scandalous. And so you want to think about why that is and what's going on. Now, part of what's going on, and this is indeed worrying, some of you concerned with the food in the learning circles will be interested to take a look at this, and this is the connection between biofuels and food production. There is a new report out from the, let's see, where is this? The Independent Institute for European Environmental Policy. And they are arguing that the use of more biofuels could take an area the size of Ireland out of food production by 2020 and accelerate climate change as well. The study says European countries have chosen to meet the standards, the renewable energy targets set by the European Union by importing biofuels from African countries or from Indonesia and Brazil. And what this does, of course, is to take force this kind of farming for biofuels, maize, corn, other things, into forests, and this is a disastrous development. As a spokesman for ActionAid said, making space for biofuel production will force other farming activity in producer countries deeper into forests. This displacement of farming activity will cause loss of wildlife habitat, carbon dioxide emissions, as well as increasing food prices, hitting some of the world's poorest people the hardest. So it could mean another 100 million people or so go hungry by just emphasizing production of food that is then turned into fuel for vehicles and other energy consumers. Now, one of the things I'd like to do for you is give you an excerpt from a very good Guardian podcast. The Guardian newspaper does regular podcasts on the environment, and this is about the perfect storm of that may affect food security in the very near future. And this is Duncan Green from Oxfam being interviewed. Listen to this.
So what are the big causes today?
Well, it's an overused cliche, but you've got a kind of perfect storm of factors all driving up prices and making prices more volatile. You've got more and more land being used to grow feed for cattle, which is a much less efficient use of land than growing grains to consume. You've got increasing impacts of climate change. Oxfam is seeing seasons becoming more unreliable, more variable, the rains coming when you don't expect them, stopping when you do expect them, which makes life impossible for farmers. Rising population. So the population of the world is currently 6.5 billion. It's going to rise to about 9 billion by mid-century and then start falling, actually. So we're approaching a last hump of rapid population growth, which means more mouths to feed in a situation where many countries are getting wealthier and therefore people's expectations are rising and they're getting more and better food, which is to be celebrated, but that all puts more pressure on food production.
So that's Mr. Green, Duncan Green from Oxfam, telling us about the perfect storm that may affect food production. And there are lots of smaller aspects to this, but there are some good movements as well that I want to report on. One is that a number of chefs at some of Britain's top restaurants are backing a parliamentary bill which would reduce the United Kingdom's meat and dairy industry's dependence on imported soya, which they say is contributing to the destruction of the South American rainforest. The reason, of course, is that this is exactly what we mean. They're destroying the rainforests to create more farmland, and the farmland is then used to feed cattle for meat and dairy products. There is this bill tabled by an MP from Stoke-on-Trent, a man named Robert Flello, would have an enormous impact, actually. It would limit wildlife and rainforest destruction. He would essentially connect the dots between wildlife and rainforest destruction and the growing of animal feedstuff. We've seen, and this is quoting from Flello, we've all seen the ads for fast food burgers where a cow is grazing on nice green pasture, or a girl collects a glass of milk from a cow in the field and takes it to the dairy to turn into yogurt. Yet the reality is so far different from the ad man's image. It's trying to make it wider known that generally your glass of milk has probably come from a cow that may never have seen the outdoors and been fed on soy that's been imported halfway around the world from land that was once rich, biodiverse Cerrado in Brazil and has now been planted with GM soy and covered in weed killer to allow it to grow. So there are more and more initiatives to connect the dots around food and to get us to eat in a sustainable way. One of the most interesting, I think, is an effort by, of all people, the Prince of Wales, the heir to the British crown. Prince Charles has come out and said that the world's ecosystems face collapse due to industrial farming methods, where animals are treated like machines. And he's warning that the world's ecosystems face collapse because of a dangerous over-reliance on industrial farming systems that work against nature rather than with it. Now, Prince Charles is quoting from various experts who predict that demand, and you'll see this in some of the other things that we've posted, predicted that demand for food will rise by 50% by 2030, and will need 30% more water and 45% more energy. So they've started an initiative. Morrison's, which is a big supermarket in the United Kingdom, is going to use a site, a farm in Scotland, to try to create simultaneously sustainable food production while testing new low-energy farming techniques with a minimal use of chemicals and improved welfare-friendly breeding methods for cattle. We'll see if this works, but it is interesting, and we need to think about how to do this, because otherwise we're going to be in very, very big trouble. Charles cited a remarkable report published by the World Bank called the International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science and Technology, and said that the world had to change its farming techniques or face social and economic collapse. It encouraged low impact and organic farming and farmings which were much less reliant on fossil fuels. Business as usual is no longer an option. Well, I hope that's true for you as well. I know that many of you are working on your learning circles. We'll be posting a final essay for the course as well here in the next week or so. But I do hope that the initiatives with regard to the learning circles are coming along smartly. I've been checking on some of them. Some seem a little bit slow, but I hope you're able to pull it together soon. I'll talk to you again in the coming week and probably send you some additional information. All the best.